Dean, a lot of people were surprised that the side played quite defensively against Rangers. Is that something you regret, and is it something you'll change going into this game?
I'm not going to really talk about what our game plan is for this weekend, but it's certainly not something that we regret at the weekend there. I think if you look at the game, I've watched it back 3 times since Sunday. And if you actually look at the game, we created the better chances within that game. We hit the bar, whereas if we react quicker, we've got an empty net, it's 1-0. We scored a perfectly good goal that for some reason it's not getting spoke about. Again, that could have made it 1-0. And then we should have scored right at the very end to equalise. So I think listening back to the interviews after the game, Rangers knew that they only created 1 chance within that game. So for us, I think we set up properly. I think we nullified their attacking options, and then we went and attacked where and when we could. We could have been a bit more composed on the ball at times, but I think the better chances came from Hibs last Sunday. I'm not saying that we deserved to win the game. I think our draw would have been a fairer result, but in terms of half chances, we created a lot more than Rangers.
Yeah, and another question for Dean. In such, like, you've got a couple of weeks, obviously playing like Rangers, City and then Celtic. Do you give the girls any extra preparation for these types of games in training, or is it just as normal?
Yeah, we just go as normal. I think if you start trying to change things, then you're kind of taking away how important other games are. I think you've got to keep the same structure for every game. I think if you start to change it, then psychologically you go up against other teams. The players might within themselves start thinking the game's not as big, where every game's only as big as your next one. So at the minute, Glasgow City's our big game, then it'll be Celtic, and then it'll be Hearts will be the big game. So we know that we need to take maximum points in every game we play. So I don't think we should change the structure for certain teams.
And final question for Dean. A lot of people are saying that the Old Firm game is now the biggest game in Scottish women's football. What do you say to that, when obviously Glasgow City and Hibs are the 2 big teams?
Disrespectful, I think. I think it's really disrespectful, not to me, because I've not been involved until this year within the first team. But I think it's disrespectful to Joelle Murray, to Hayley Lauder, to players like that who have given so much to the women's game. And I think until they've achieved what these players have achieved and what these clubs have achieved, what Hibs and Glasgow City have achieved, I think maybe the media should be a bit more respectful to Hibs and Glasgow City, because there's nothing to suggest that we won't still be up there challenging along with Rangers and Celtic. Just because they're now going to be part of a group challenging doesn't mean that Hibs and Glasgow City aren't. So I think it is disrespectful to Hibs and Glasgow City, but not necessarily the clubs, but the players within the clubs. Players who've given so much to the women's game over the past decade, who are just getting written off now because a couple of teams are throwing a bit of money.
Dean, from your perspective, obviously you kind of touched upon it. Glasgow City Hibs is probably the most historic fixture, if you like, in Scottish women's football. It's had some amazing matches over the years. Coming into this what's your kind of feelings going into this big match?
Just excitement. I've watched enough of them, being involved within the youth setup, and we were always aware that when Hibs and Glasgow City played, it was a big game. So whenever they played and we weren't playing, I'd get along to them, whether it be a Friday night or if it was a later kick-off or whatnot, or if the game was on Alba. So I'm fully aware of what these games entail and what it means to the clubs to go and win them. And I think both teams, although there's been a few changes to squads, are pretty similar. So I expect the exact same from Glasgow City that allows me to prepare maybe the same way Grant would, who'd maybe played them more often. So yeah, I think for me it's excitement, and these are the games you want to play in, and Hibs and Glasgow City will be the forefront of that for a good while now.
In terms of your opponents, they've gone through a number of different changes, which they've had quite a steady squad. This has probably been the biggest shift for them. What do you make of Glasgow City in going into this match?
I think they're just as strong as they've always been. For me, they've recruited well. I mean, we know that they're losing a few players in December, January, whenever it is that they're losing them, but they've also recruited players already. Caelan Meaky is more than experienced in this league, so we expect Glasgow City to be just as strong as they've always been. Maybe they're not as used to the transition as much as we are, because that happens to Hibs every year. As you say, Glasgow City's maybe just getting used to that now, so that might be a small factor that might come into it, but I don't think it'll be a big one.
In terms of the games between the sides, you said you've also watched a few of them. Is there any in particular that stand out in your memory and perhaps you take a wee bit of inspiration, remind the players of going into this one?
I just think any of the ones that we've won, I think it gives belief. I know I don't know the answers because I wasn't in the changing room, but I don't know how you can win all the cups but you can't win the league games. It's just bizarre how that happens, because it's not like maybe the men's game where they put weaker sides out in cup competitions. We've not got enough players in the women's game to do that. So it's just bizarre how it's happened. But if they can take the belief that they've took from these cup games and take it into the league fixture, then I've got no doubt that we can go and get 3 points on Sunday.